Hello and welcome back to HEMAFightBreakdowns. Today I want to talk about deflecting cuts and a concept that I call defensive surface area. So this is an exchange that happened at Ascalon a couple months ago, and it was, I think, a very, very good demonstration of the strengths and weaknesses of deflecting cuts, and specifically the methodology that you use to get past them. So we'll watch the exchange here. So what happened here is Fencer on the right attempted to get Fencer on the left out of their long point forward guard with a couple of deflecting cuts. But there were two primary issues that were happening here. The first is that these deflecting cuts were actually really good and really well targeted. But they suffered from one clear problem that I think a lot of deflecting cuts have, and that is what I'm calling surface area. So if you want to imagine that this was like basically painted as kind of color, or maybe if I had better Photoshop skills, what I want to play is right when these deflecting cuts are happening, you want to imagine that there's like a video game-esque after image that is being left behind in the sword in its entire arcing path. And when you think about it that way, you can see where it is that this deflecting cut is going, where it's defending, and what it's attempting to do. And you see this one coming straight across the middle with a slight upward tilt directly into the path of the sword. And this is a good path for a deflecting cut to take, specifically because when your opponent is in a long guard, what you want to do is engage the middle, or at least as far in as you can to their sword without being on the strong. So one, they can't just dip their tip or pull it out of the way easily, although that's sort of what happens here. But again, regardless of whether or not they pull their tip out of the way, if they do that, you've still successfully cleared their blade, even if you didn't make contact. So in that particular instance, the after image, or the surface area, is basically this flat plane directly across the middle, defending against the most common thing that you would do from this, which is thrust. But where we sort of run into issues is where the second one happens, which is right here. So if we watch this one from the right side, it comes down from the side at a 45-degree angle and then kind of swipes across the middle. And the problem is that unlike that other one, the ability for the opponent to pull their sword up was a lot simpler, specifically because it wasn't as far forward. If we go back and we watch the original one again, pay attention to how close this tip is to the opponent's strong, and how difficult and how much this sword has to move from here to here, all the way like a full body length just to get out of the way. Whereas with this second one, the distance is very different and the surface area is very different. And what that means is that when this is about 4 or 5 inches shorter, the ability for the opponent to pull their sword back is much simpler, and that counter cut can be used to basically interrupt the flow of those deflecting cuts, to basically trick a person into putting themselves into this kind of tail guard, or this low, I guess, iron gate it would be in Fiore, and basically pop them over the top before they can really get their sword up and away. So going back to surface area for a second, if you want deflecting cuts to work, there are two things that you need to be thinking about. One is what you're defending against, and what you're defending against should be the most common attack that's coming from the guard your opponent's in. If their guard is low and their tip is forward, that's a thrust. If their tip is high and up towards the sky or low towards the ground, it's a cut. And what you want to do is you want to imagine that video game like after image, and you want to make the surface area of your deflecting cut do two things: cross the path of their sword where it is, and cross the path of their sword where it would go if it were to attack you immediately. And as long as it basically has both of those qualities, it's going to be successful. If you do so out of range and your surface area does not take advantage of the one situation that you're going with and that your opponent is showing you, then this is what's going to happen. You're going to overcommit a little bit on a parry, and you're going to be punished exactly as you would if you did overcommit on a parry, as though they threw a feint and you bit on an attack that didn't even happen. All right, that's going to be it for today. If you'd like to see your own footage featured on the channel, feel free to send me an email over at HEMAFightBreakdowns@gmail.com, and I hope to see you next time.